Please be seated. I want all those that are young at heart, especially the children, to come down now. Will you? Will, how are you? Savannah, how are you? Aunt Savannah. I heard your Aunt Savannah today.
Do you have a new nephew or a niece?
My niece is just...
Josh, I thought you were going to
just
camp.
visiting. Okay.
Do what? Oh, it's finished already? Hey, are y'all doing good today? Yeah? Good. Hey, did any of y'all have a garden? Anybody have a garden? Savannah, Will, y'all have a garden? How's your garden doing? I got lots of vegetables. It's amazing. My garden is exploding. That's what happens when you give God a little help and God says, I'll bless you for your labors. You know that, don't you? You know, you do a little work, God does a lot. And then you get good flowers and vegetables. We're kind of like that, you know. We're kind of like God's flowers. Did you know that? The church? We're kind of like that. The story today on this long season of ordinary time is what we call it. This is a story about Jesus. He's just sent his troops out to heal the sick and raise the dead. Do you believe that, Josh? Sent them out. Do all these wonderful things, Will. Will, what? You got a question? You just believe it too, don't you? And he says to him, he says, don't be afraid. He said, I'm going to be with you. But then he says it's a really interesting thing. He says, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to divide all of you. Does that sound like God? He's going to divide us? It doesn't really, does it? Now, one thing he says in this story, it's a real strange story. He's talking to his disciples and he says, God has every hair on your head numbered. Isn't that amazing? Now count. How many hair are on my head? How many? Can you, want somebody come over here and count? Savannah, can you count them? How many do you think? 0? Well, there's some up there. I just shave it, you know. But it's really pretty sparse up here. But God knows every one of them that I do have. Do y'all believe that? God knows every hair on your hair. Now, he's not talking about hair here, is he? He's not really talking about hair. What he's talking about is the relationship that we have with God and the relationships we have with each other. And he wants us to believe in the power of us being together. Now, I couldn't think of many stamps to give you, but I got a stamp of Pocahontas and her, who's the guy? It was a crossword puzzle answer this week. But anyway, this is the Pilgrim and the Native American got together, right? And they bound themselves as one. I got you a stamp of the two of them together. Come on. Anybody want a stamp? No? Aunt Savannah doesn't. Scarlett, you're the only one coming for a stamp. That's so exciting. Look at here, the girl. Let's put it. Let's take our time doing it because the people like to watch me put stamps on your hand. Isn't that good? That's good, isn't it? Go on. Father, make us the masters of ourselves that we might become the servants of others. Take our minds and think with them. Take our lips and speak through them. And take our hearts and set them on fire through Christ our Lord. Amen. You know, I'm aware that there are some people not here today, right? And I hope they're with their families. Don't y'all? But you know what? I'm with my family today. This is my family. I look around and I see all of you, and I know there's stories that are weaved together, right? And this morning, over on this side, right here, in this little area here, this whole place was filled with Norman Smith's family. There must have been 20, 30 of them. They were all here. This wonderful family that has come to be part of our family. Now, I want you two stand up. And Deb, you stand up too. See these two here? That's their first Sunday to Acolyte, brother and sister. Isn't that cool? And you know you're part of our family, don't you? Yeah. And Deb here, we met at a bar. And now,
why do you have to tell this story?
And you're part of our family now, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. Y'all can sit down. Well, that's not strange. Father Rick and I met at the poker table.
As I was taking your money.
We are all family here. Y'all believe that? We're all interwoven. Now that means something. When one of us is sad, we should lift that one up. When one of us is happy, that person should be able to celebrate with all of us. But it doesn't always work that way, does it? Sometimes we get in a tiff with a family member. That's understandable. That happens because we are drawn to the ways of the world. I'm going to tell you a story. I just got back from the Cranmer Cup golf tournament. As you all know, we talked about it last week. It's a group of Anglican clergy, some Episcopalians, some Episcopal Church of Canada, some Episcopal Church of Scotland, some Episcopal Church of Ireland, and the Church of England, all gathered together. Now, over the years, we have bound together with a common cord running through us. We've lost 2 of our members to death. One got too old to fly. But we're all family when we get together. And we share our stories. We were playing golf, and we'd played about 9 holes, and Father Rick and I were playing together on the first match, and we were there with David Skeets, who used to be the head of a seminary, dean of a seminary. He's retired now, doing work with the poor on the borders of Scotland. And I'm telling him the story of my daughter-in-law, Diane, and her cancer that she's struggling with. And the hope is that he will spread the word and prayer will begin in his little area of the world. And I tell him about little Callie Ann that was born 2 months before her diagnosis with Down syndrome. And he says to me, I have a Down syndrome child. He's 38. His name is Jeremy. I told him I would tell you to pray for him. So pray for Jeremy. And then Father Rick comes up and he says, I have a sister who's got Down syndrome. She's 62. And there we were bound together with these common stories, messy stories, right? You know life is messy. Have y'all ever heard that before? And I'm aware that whenever families get together, there's always stories that run through that are a little difficult, right? That we sometimes have difficulty in our relationships because we're at stalemates. We bounce our heads against the wall or against each other's heads. I was on my first Cranmer Cup, and before the tournament, we toured Ireland. And we went to this place called Connors Pass. Anybody ever been there? It's on the Dingle Peninsula. It's one of the most beautiful places on the face of the earth. Majestic, holy. And people flock to it. It's way up on a mountain and it looks down on the sea. And it's gorgeous. Look it up on the internet. The pictures are breathtaking. And we were there, a bunch of old, tired Episcopal priest golfers. And we'd finished our rounds for the day. We were headed to our next location. And we were just sitting there, taking it in, taking pictures, breathing the fresh air. And then we got in our car to leave. We had several vans that we were hauling all our golf clubs and everything around in. And we pulled down, and nothing is happening. Everybody is blocked it out. Nobody's moving. The traffic's not going anywhere. And nobody's giving an inch. Isn't that the way the world works sometimes? I want my way. And then somebody else says, but, excuse me, I want my way. And when that happens, this is what happens. Nothing gets done. And I was sitting there, and we were going, what are we going to do? And I jumped out of the car, and I started playing General Patton. And I got the traffic moving. And that began the myth of me, the golf whisperer. And one of the people with me was John Ross, my friend who's the dean of the cathedral in Knoxville. And we've built a relationship through traveling and playing golf together. And he was with us on this trip that we just went on. He was with us at our first destination, and he's talking to Father Rick and I, or me, and he says, the church is dying. Our church is dying. And I looked at him and I said, my church is not dying. My church is wonderful. My church is exploding, just like my garden. And when I said that, I said it with conviction because I believed it. And I'm not talking about the Episcopal Church or St. Matthew's, but the church that Jesus died for, is alive because Jesus is alive. Do you believe me? Do you believe that? Now, my journey has taken me far and wide, and you don't want to go to some of the places I've been to, but one of the things that my grandmother, my Church of Christ grandmother, taught me years ago when I was a little bitty boy, she's been dead since I was 12, was how to play poker. I love poker. Great game. And I was playing at a clergy conference, and one of the priests, Father Rick used to work for him, he was slow as molasses, real slow. And one of the other priests, who's a friend of mine and has played with him many times, he goes, yin out, meaning are you going to be in the hand or you're going to be out? You got a choice. Get on with it. Make your choice. Decide. But he was sitting there reading his cards like he was reading a good novel. Yin out, yin out, yin out. Y'all got it now? You in or you out? Yin out, yin out, yin out. Okay. I started laughing. I couldn't quit laughing because I realized the game was stalled because one person couldn't get it together, couldn't move. Somebody had to direct traffic. So I said something more appropriate than yin out. Play your cards. I go on these trips, and Father Rick have a lot of time, and I have a lot of time to talk while we're driving, and we talk a lot about relationships. We talk about family. We talk about how these stories weave together. He's new here. He'll say, tell me about this person, and I'll start telling him a story, and before it's over with, I've told him about 14 or 15 people, right? And their stories are all complicated and messy, and yet somehow they all go together because everybody in the story loves each other. That's what church is supposed to be about. Jesus in the story today. And you may wonder, last Sunday was Trinity Sunday, why Father Rick preached Trinity Sunday. Those of you here last week, some of you were gone. And if you were at St. Mattress, shame on you. You know what St. Mattress is, right? If you were with your family, that's a good thing. But we missed you here. Our family missed you. Where was I? Father Rick preached on Trinity Sunday because he's the associate. That's what the rector does. He pawns off Trinity Sunday on them. But he didn't know that I was going to preach on this today. Very complicated story, isn't it? I mean, Jesus says some things in here that you want to go, did Jesus really say that? But this is a story that has to be read in the context of which it was pulled. This story is about Jesus and his disciples. And we're not talking about just the 12. We're talking about a whole bunch of people that believed. They believed in Jesus and they believed in each other. And Jesus sent them out and he said, I'm going to send you out to heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons. All those things that Jesus did, he sent them out to do. We don't hear in this story what happened. But we hear they've come back, and in their coming back, Jesus says these words. He says, listen to me. You know, you and I, we're on the same level here. Don't think of me as being greater than you, but you're not greater than me. We're just kind of on the same level. We're all working together. And you know, you may think you could slough off and hide somewhere or have something going on inside of you that's false. And we all do, you know, sometimes. I know I've lived lie lots of times. He said, but that's not going to be the thing that's going to happen in this new reality. Anything in the dark will be brought to the light. So live your life with integrity, is what he's telling them. And don't be afraid of anything. There's going to be some people, and you can imagine as they were going out doing these extraordinary things, there were some people looking in with daggers. And they probably had a little fear and trepidation. I know I do sometimes. I usually wear a cross, and whenever I'm in a point which really tight, I grab the cross. But I gave it to my daughter-in-law, Diane. She's wearing it now. So every time now when y'all test me really hard, or the devil tests me really, I grab for my cross, and then I remember to pray for Diane. Don't be afraid of anything. Because let me tell you something. God knows every hair on your head. Now that's comforting for some of you, right? Maybe, I don't have many hairs on my head. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about relationships. He's talking about God wants to have a relationship with you that's greater than any relationship you're going to have on this earth. And then he says something else. He says, yin yout. Yin yout. Right? Did y'all hear that? Yin yout. He said, if you acknowledge me before man, I will acknowledge you before God in heaven. If you deny me before man, I'll deny you before God in heaven. Yin yout, right? Yin yout. Make up your mind. Because I didn't come to bring peace. I came to stir you up. I believe that. My church is not dying. Thursday, we went down to the diocese. We went down there in Mass. There was 10 of us, I think, 9 of us, something like that. 9, I think. Plus our 2 bankers, and one of them's a member of the parish. So we went down there to present our vision for the future for St. Matthew's. We have a plan, and we want your approval, right? Now, some of our members in the group thought that numbers would sell the idea to the people that were there. And I said, no, they're going to decide in their gut. Inspiration is going to be what's going to turn the day for them. And sure enough, there came a time where the numbers weren't quite exactly like someone could understand. And I began to talk about you. Now, that's easy for me because I love you. You know that? I do. I really love you. I talk about you all the time. And I talk about all the things that you have been able to accomplish. Everything. I started giving them a litany of things. This and that. This. I forgot the bell choir. I apologize for that, but you guys were outstanding last Sunday. Weren't they great? And all of these happened by the grace of God. Not because of me. And I told them that. I said, all of these things didn't happen because of me. I said, I'm a mediocre priest at best. I said, there was a group down in Wetumpka when I was there. They were out to get me, and they decided they would evaluate me. And when they came and presented it to me, they said, Steve, here's the deal. You graded poor to below average in every category. And a few weeks later, I had a conversation with my senior warden, and I said, Mike, I want to tell you something. He looked at me, he said, what? I said, I'm the best poor to below average priest you're ever going to have. It's not about me. It's about the grace of God moving through community, which is what the church is all about. It's about love and the intertwined relationships that we all share. And it's about Jesus Christ. I read a book recently about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and if you've never heard about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you need to look him up. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a saint. He died before he was 40 years old. He was hung. And 2 weeks before he was hung, or 2 weeks after he was hung, the camp that he was in was liberated by the Allied armies in World War II. 2 weeks. They kept having to move him later on in the war because the Allied forces kept bombing the prisons and destroying them. And there's a story that one of the survivors tell about how they were all gathered together in this little bitty cell. It was nighttime. There was no electricity. The bombs had knocked out the electricity. and they could hear them coming down, and one hit real close to the cell in which all these men were and a few women, and it shook the walls, rattled the windows and the bars, and they were all afraid except for one. Dietrich Bonhoeffer stood and had this angelic smile on his face, the man said. And a few days later, he was hung. Don't be afraid. Yin out, right? Are you in or are you out? You have a choice. Trust me, and I will acknowledge you before God Almighty. There's another story we read today. It's in the Old Testament. You have to understand these stories in the context of the greater picture as well. Who is this God that we worship and believe and trust in? In this story, the father Abraham, the father of many nations. If you know the story, Abram and Sarah were promised children. And God said, I will make from you a great nation. And then nothing happened. Nothing. You know, we went through a pledge drive for this building, and one of the questions was, why didn't we get more pledges? And you know, I don't know. But now that we're breaking ground soon, I expect we'll get some more. Because sometimes it takes a little more concreteness for people to realize, hey, I want to be a part of this. So I wasn't worried about it because I know you. And I know you're going to do great things by the grace of God. Hagar came into the picture when Sarah couldn't bear children. Abraham, who now had become Abraham, was a little worried. Maybe that happens sometimes when God's providence doesn't happen immediately. And you know that God's providence is about a plan. You know that, don't you? And that we're part of that plan. Do you know that? You are part of God's plan. God has a plan and you're part of it. And that plan is glorious. It's going to lead you into the kingdom of heaven. That's good news. You know that, don't you? God's providence is never easy to understand. It's always complicated because it involves all of these people moving together. And sometimes it doesn't look like you want it to. I talked to someone this week, and I talked to him about how I thought we were going through another evolutionary cycle. Remember that? And the evolutionary cycle means that God is doing us just like he does cells in the body, right? Just move new people in and out. And some people go somewhere else. Some people stay put, and we grow in our love for one another. And remember those people that came into our lives that contributed. Hagar was a part of this story. She was a slave. Unfortunately, they had slaves back then, and Abraham took her as his concubine and had a child by her named Ishmael. We don't hear about Ishmael in this story, but Ishmael was playing with Isaac in this story, and Sarah gets all out of whack. She can't deal with it. You're going to have to get rid of Hagar, the slave, and her son, and I don't want to hear anything else about it. Well, Abraham was kind of nonplussed about this because he loved Ishmael, fruit of his loins. But God said, don't you worry. You do like your wife says, because it's part of my plan. And I'm going to take care of her. Yin out, yin out. And Abraham said, I'm in, you know. And so Abraham does what God says. And Hagar, she goes off into the wilderness. She thinks her son's going to die. She doesn't want to watch him. She sends him away. She goes to another place. She's going to die. And all of a sudden God says, don't you worry about a thing, Hagar. I'm going to take care of you. Because you're part of God's plan too. Now let me tell you what happens. The people of Islam believe that Ishmael is the father of their great nation. And they are a great nation, no matter what you think about their ideology or their terrorists or all that people. It's a great body of people that believe. They believe in the one God, just like we do. And they're children of Abraham, just like we are. And yet, what's happened between us? We fight all the time, don't we? Well, we got reasons for that. Well, sure. God, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you, Ishmael, Hagar, Steve, Ricky, Betty. I'm going to take care of you. Are you in, you out? You in, you out? You going to be in or you going to be out? You got to make a decision. God's providence is always good. Jesus said, don't be afraid. That's good news. Those with ears to hear, let them hear.